Hello and happy Friday. Anyway, all right, so I'm here to cover my first official topic. So my first topic was submitted by Kate F on my Instagram photo that I posted a while ago. So the first topic that I'm going to cover is injury prevention and injury care. I'm going to cover three main parts of injury prevention. So the three that I'm going to cover are a proper warm-up, proper weight/form when you're doing your workout, and also a proper cool down for your workout that you did do. So first, with a dynamic warm-up, I do have some notes just so I can keep my thoughts in line because I'm a rambler. So dynamic warm-up includes dynamic stretches, full body movements. So dynamic stretching is just a moving stretch. So rather than holding for a long period of time to lengthen the muscles, we're just going to go through quicker bursts of different stretches and movements. So that way we can get blood flowing to the muscles, increase muscle temperature, and get the synovial joint fluid moving through your joints. So that way during your workout, your muscles and joints aren't in shock all of a sudden when you start loading weights to your body. So dynamic warm-up is generally body weight, or for certain things you can use lighter weights like a warm-up set kind of thing. You want to warm up the appropriate muscles for what your workout is going to entail. So going on the elliptical for 10 minutes does not count as warming up your shoulders, if that makes sense. Yes, your body will feel warmed up afterwards, but you're not actually getting the joint moving that you're going to be working. Dynamic stretching for appropriate muscles being worked. Second is that you want your dynamic warm-up to be about 10 to 15 minutes. It should be almost a mini workout. So it will consist of dynamic stretches, moving stretches like I said, and also full body movements. So maybe body weight squats, push-ups, bridges, crunches, plank. The last thing for the dynamic warm-up is a lot of times after we get someone through a dynamic warm-up, they're like, whew, I feel like I already worked out. That's the idea. You should feel pretty warm. That was a cattail. You should feel pretty warmed up. A little sweaty is good. That means your body is ready to go. Now on to the actual workout portion. So number one thing is form over weight and ego. So I see in the gym all the time people just wanting to lift heavy weight, which that's great if you can do it properly. But if you're lifting heavy weight improperly, you may not get hurt the first time, but over and over, and then the more you load on, the higher your risk of injury will be. Drop the weight, drop the ego, do what's appropriate for the rep range that you're looking for. If you cannot properly stabilize and move the weight that you're trying to move, it's too heavy. You're already putting yourself at risk for injury, even if you did a dynamic warm-up. Get your workout in, because you're going to get the best bang for your buck for being in the gym at that time and doing your workout if the weight is appropriate. Then you will appropriately challenge the muscles and then be able to increase your weights. The second part for working out, you want to allow 24 to 36 hours at least between training a muscle group. So I would go closer to the 36-hour range, so that way the muscle doesn't become overworked. If you overwork a muscle, it's not going to grow, and you're just not going to see the same benefit as if you give it that time to kind of heal and recoup a little bit before you go ahead and train again. The third thing I would like to point out is having a spotter if necessary. I actually work out by myself all the time. Just be mindful of the weight that you're trying to move. If you're trying to break a record, try and find somebody there, maybe someone that works at the gym that can kind of spot you a little bit. It's not worth hurting yourself if you don't have someone like that available just to move a couple extra pounds. All right, so the cool down is the last part of injury prevention. So the purpose of a cool down is to re-lengthen the muscles that we worked. When we're working out, we're shortening the muscles, causing contractions when we're working out, so that shortens the muscles. So the idea of the cool down is to elongate the muscles again, so that way we don't pull something, tear something. You want to make sure you're doing stretches for the muscles worked. 10 to 15 minutes for a cool down. You want to make sure you're holding stretches for at least 30 seconds, maybe 30 to 45 seconds, 3 to 4 times for each stretch. So if that's your hamstrings, 3 to 4 times each leg. If you're holding your stretch for less than 30 seconds, it's pretty much a waste of your time because it's not enough time for the muscles to actually adapt to the stretch. So if you're going to spend the time to stretch, which you should, at least make it worth your time and hold for true 30 seconds at least. With stretches, you want to make sure that you also have proper form. There are incorrect ways to do stretches where you're not really getting the best benefit out of the stretch. So make sure you have proper form so that way you can target the muscles exactly how they should be targeted. All right, injury care. So if you do happen to injure yourself, and it doesn't even necessarily mean you did something wrong, it's okay. I've injured myself. I've had freak things happen, things that I don't expect to happen. It's fine. We can take care of it. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. Rest. Make sure you rest. If you strain, sprain, injure, ache, something is going on with a joint, muscle group, whatever, make sure you rest. You're not going to lose all of your progress if you just give it some rest and time to heal. Ice. So when you first injure something, you want to ice it to reduce inflammation and swelling. So rest, ice, 10 to 15 minutes at a time, 20 minutes off, and do that as much as you can or as needed. Compression. So when you're icing, you can also wrap something around to make sure it's nice and snug and compress so that you can compress the swollen area. That will help reduce the inflammation as well. And then elevation, say your foot is swollen, you sprained your ankle, keep it elevated so that the blood can flow back up towards the heart and it's not all just pooling in your ankle. That's just an example. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. That was my cat. Rest as much as you can. Don't continue to train the muscle if it's injured. Ice 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Maybe like 20 minutes off in between if you're going to do it consistently. Compression, wrap the ice on there, keep it snug so that way you're really getting the injury location. 4 is elevation. So for example, with your ankle, if you sprain your ankle and it's swelling, you want to keep it elevated so the blood flow can come back up towards the heart and isn't continuing to stay in your ankle. The swelling is going to increase the pain. So the less swelling, less pain. All right, that's all I have to say about injury prevention and care. I hope this video was helpful. If you have questions, comments, concerns, please comment below. Send me a message, whatever you want. I'm here to chat. So thanks for joining in and stay tuned for next week's video. Have a great Friday and I'll see you guys next week.